Hey there, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So here we are, Rock Legends. Finally going to do this AC/DC show that I've been promising. I was hoping to put it on my new computer system, but I seem to be computer challenged and have not figured out how to do that yet. So at some point I will now seek somebody else's help with it. I have a friend of mine, and we will try to figure out why it is I can't figure it out. My guess is that's because I'm not really that good with these things. But anyways, I still have my old computer here, so I will attempt to do the video this way. So we're here to talk about AC/DC. So for me, AC/DC were discovered when this album came out, Back in Black. It was the summer of 1980. This album was a mega monster hit, and I bought it and I played it a lot. But we're going to do AC/DC in 2 episodes, and the first episode will take place in the era that came prior to this arrangement of Back in Black. So if you prefer, we call it the Bon Scott era. So for me, AC/DC, so a little bit of the history. They were formed in 1973 by brothers Malcolm Young and Angus Young. Malcolm was the main driving force at the beginning, as he was the older of the 2 brothers, and then he brought his little brother Angus in. The 2 of them formed the band called AC/DC. The original members of the band consisted of Larry Van Cryft, I believe, Colin Burgess, who I assume is the Colin Burgess from Master's Apprentice. I'm sure somebody will tell me if I'm wrong here, but that's who I assume it is. And then, of course, Dave Evans, along with Angus and Malcolm. So Dave Evans was a bit of a guy who was kind of a glam artist. Like, he had that glamour part to him, and I don't think that they really wanted to go in that direction. I think they wanted to be, basically they wanted to be a rock and roll band, which to me is what AC/DC is, a rock and roll band. You'll hear people say they're a hard rock band. Yeah, they're a little bit of that, obviously. Heavy metal band, I don't know if I buy that at all. I don't think of them as heavy metal at all. Although they did play with some notable heavy metal giants. Anyways, they were, like I said, they were formed in 73 by the 2 brothers, and they played a lot of bars and did the circuit in Sydney, Australia early on, getting to expose themselves, and they were serious about it. And usually you'll find that there's a couple guys in every band that's become iconic that were very serious about being rock stars. And for AC/DC, that was the Young brothers, Angus and Malcolm. So also at this time, they did, their brother George and their older brother George also came along to help them out as well. And he was the one that produced their first album, I do believe. Let's see if I can find my notes here. Where is it? I don't got these in any kind of order. Yes, he did along with Harry Vonda, produced their first album. But prior to their first album being produced, the band decided to part company with Dave Evans, since he wasn't the type of vocalist that they really want, and they took on their chauffeur, as strange as that might seem. And their chauffeur was Bon Scott, who became the vocalist for AC/DC. Now, Bon had played with several bands local to Sydney as well. He was also a fellow Scotlander. So he came from Scotland, like Malcolm and Angus, and immigrated to Australia. So there was a common bond there between the 3 of them, I believe. So the band at this point in time, prior to releasing their Their first album, which was to be called High Voltage, and was going to be produced by Harry Bonda and George Young, their older brother, of course. They took on some new members to the band. Of course, Bon Scott, who we just said, became the vocalist. They had Rob Bailey and Peter Clark, I believe that's who it is. Maybe Klask, but I think it's Clark. Anyways, if I'm wrong, somebody will let me know. I'm almost certain of that. So they decided to release this album, and they did in February 17th, 1975. But it was only released in Australia. So then they did a follow-up album called TNT, which was also only released in Australia. That came out the same year, at the end of the year, on December 1st. Both albums featuring the AC/DC, a little bit of a feel, but not really there were still some differences in their music from what we've become to know as AC/DC. They added Phil Rudd, their longtime drummer at this time, and Mark Evans on bass. So in the next three albums, this lineup would be the solid lineup of the band. So then, after they continued to tour, they decided they wanted to make the jump internationally, and so for their follow-up release, they then combined the albums TNT and High Voltage, their first two albums, taking on the title of High Voltage, which is of course this album here, which is the international version of this album. So what they did is they took the songs from both the two albums, and they picked the best songs from both albums, and they put them on here. You know, ironically, there was one song on here, I believe, where is it? Can I Sit Next to You, Girl? That was a song that originally was sang by Dave Evans, but they took the song and Bon Scott sang it on this album. This is a very, very good album, kind of bright in color. But this is their first international version of their album, their first album that went overseas. Didn't do particularly well. I do think it charted in some places, but didn't do terribly well. But at least got them some exposure to North America. I believe around this time, they were touring as backup band for a couple of people, and I think one of those bands was Black Sabbath. Now this is a bit of a kind of a folk tale. I don't know if it's a folk tale or more of a legend. Maybe more of a legend might be a description, where they were touring as the backup band for Black Sabbath, and there was a disagreement between Black Sabbath's bass player Geezer Butler and Malcolm Young, and a altercation ensued. So the band was kicked off the tour. Seems almost ludicrous now that they would be backup for Black Sabbath, but you know, that's how the story goes. I'm not going to say it's true or it isn't true. I assume that there's some truth to it. There has to be, otherwise it would never have popped up in the first place. So then, once they'd been touring North America, they then got started producing more albums. One of them was this one. I believe this is their third album, this would be their fourth album, right? Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. I'm just looking to make sure I got it right. Yeah, so this came out in April of 1976. Basically the same lineup as their High Voltage album. However, album didn't do as well internationally as they hoped, and was re-released again in 1981. And I believe that was the case with all of their albums, as once Back in Black hit the scene, people started going back and buying up their other stuff, and that's when these other albums started to become popular and well known. They did the next album they did out was Let There Be Rock, and I've had this album in vinyl. I've had it in in cassette, but I never have gotten this in CD. I've looked for it, and when I find it, it will definitely be on my list to get, because I think this, for me, is probably my favorite of their albums, Bon Scott albums. It's got a lot of really solid tracks on it, a whole lot of Rosies on this, which is one of my favorite AC/DC tracks. And this lineup is the exact same lineup they've had for the previous two albums, 30 Deeds Done Dirt Cheap and High Voltage. So they've got the same five guys playing here. Album did okay, again. I think this one actually was the first one to make the charts. I may have been wrong. I think High Voltage did not make the charts. I think the first one to make some headway on the charts was Let There Be Rock. So then their next album out is this one, Power Age. Oh. I guess maybe I should have secured that a little better in there. That's better now. And it comes with a book as well. All of them do now, pretty much. This was a great album. Lots of really heavy stuff on this. The band is now fully sounding like AC/DC. Sorry, I'm having a hard time getting this book back into where it belongs. There we go. Now we're good. There it is. Power Outage. Or Power Age. Power Outage. Power Age. So another good album. This is one of the few AC/DC albums, at least from the originals, the pre-Back in Black albums, that I have never really had a chance to really follow. There are a few tracks on here that I am. Rock and Roll Damnation, Gone Sooner. I've heard these songs before, but I have never really listened to this album in its entirety more than once, which is the ones that since I bought it, I've listened to it once. So it's a solid album. The big change here is that during this period of time, probably right after Let There Be Rock, Mark Evans, who was the bass player for AC/DC, had some altercations with Angus Young, which didn't sit well with the band. He also was probably drunk while this happened, got in a bit of an argument with Angus, and next thing you know, he's out the door. They kicked him out of the band and replaced him with longtime bassist Cliff Williams, who then takes over and basically plays with AC/DC for most of the rest of their history. So this band going forward is now what they would call the classic lineup of AC/DC. So that album came out in '78, Power Age, and then of course we get to this one, Highway to Hell. We've got all five of their classic members here. This album comes out. It goes 7 times platinum in the States. Mega album. It's got the song Highway to Hell. Girls Got Rhythm is on here. Touch Too Much. I'm trying to see what if you want blood, you got it. Like, there's just one. Night Prowlers on here. All great tracks. It's a fantastic album, considered by many AC/DC fans to be their best album. I'm not going to argue. I like it a lot. I don't know if it's my favorite album by them, but it certainly is a great album. So then, so this album comes out July 27th, 1979. I don't know why I wrote 76, but it's obviously not the case. It was 79, featuring Phil Rudd, Cliff Williams, Angus and Malcolm Young, and Bon Scott. So AC/DC finally had cracked the international barrier and were becoming big superstars by this time. Group is doing well, but there's some cracks in the armor. Bon Scott isn't happy. He's drinking too much. He's partying too much. He's living that bad boy life. He's the quintessential front man, doing all the things that you're expected to do, and he's overindulging in everything. And he's talking about to his friends about quitting the band and getting his act together. And then the unthinkable happens. He drinks too much one night, chokes to death on his vomit, and is found the next day in his car. So AC/DC at this point is saying, we don't know what to do. Maybe we'll just fold the band and that's it. But apparently Bon Scott's family, mother, I think was specifically the one I read, said that they should go on and continue. That's what Bon would want. And so that's what they did. But so that's kind of a loose description of their history. And the brief loose. Now, the nuances of this band are many. There are many. The firing of Mark Evans probably was caused because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. That's what I think, and got himself into some hot water with Angus, and that was a no-no, and so they let him go. But that kind of stuff, I'm not blaming Mark for this, because that kind of stuff goes part and parcel. If you're in a band that's drinking a lot and partying a lot, you're going to say and do stuff that, doesn't always going to sit well with people. And they replaced him with Cliff Williams, who became a solid member of the band for the remaining, for primarily most of the rest of their history. Scott's alcohol overdose took place on February the 19th, 1980, not too long after the release of their seminal album at that time, which was Highway to Hell. This one, of course, we already discussed it. But it was a good half year, but it was they had planned to make another album. They'd already been talking about it. It's just, for them, it must have been a monumental shock, because he was, without a doubt, the kind of front man that every band wants. Anyways, this is the unfortunate turn of events for AC/DC. However, they did rebound, and we'll be getting into that when we do the second episode, which will probably come out in a couple weeks' time. But I just wanted to talk about the individual members of the band. We talked a little bit about Mark Evans already. Talked a little bit more about Bon Scott as we go along, but I wanted to talk about Malcolm Young now. To me, Malcolm Young is the primary guy who created all of these absolutely incredible riffs that are renowned for being AC/DC. People hear these riffs and they know that's AC/DC. I think he's the main guy on this. His own band members, his own brother, said he was the driving force of the band. Maybe not so much later in life, but during this period of time, definitely he was the kind of, I guess you might say he was the quiet leader of the band. He didn't want the front. He left Angus to do that. Now, people always say Angus is the better guitar player in that, but I don't buy that. I think that they're probably both equal. I think they both could do both parts if they wanted to, but Angus had that kind of small young boy look that enamored him to the crowd, and I think that they recognized that fairly quickly and capitalized on it by letting Angus taking the lead, and the persona of the group, leading them as kind of like almost like a mascot. I don't think Malcolm wanted that. He was the basically, I think he was the riff master here, who helped write a lot of these catchy tunes, no doubt about it in my mind. And I think he doesn't get enough credit, nor do I think he really cared too much for the credit. The band did well, and he was happy to be part of that. But I think he's one of the unsung heroes of this band. The other guys, Phil Rudd, Cliff Williams, both capable musicians. Rudd knew how to keep the beat. He knew how to keep the the rhythm section completely under control his whole career. And unfortunately, he has problems later on, which we'll get into when we get into the next episode. However, he was the steadfast backbone of the group here, along with Malcolm Young and Cliff Williams, who solidified the bass part by simply showing up and doing his job every night, not causing a huge fuss, and just being a real strong support of the group. And that's the kind of guys you need. If you're going to go anywhere, you need to have people in place who can do it night after night and not get themselves in a lifestyle that's detrimental to them. Unfortunately for Bon, that became the case. He just simply went overboard, and he lived the part that he played on stage. And Bon Scott, for me, is probably my favorite hard rock vocalist. I think he is. I think he's, not only is he a great vocalist, he had charisma. He had a lot of charisma. It came through on the videos that he made. It came through on his stage presence. He was a very frontal man, one of the great rock vocalists in my mind of all time. And one of the main reasons AC/DC is as legendary as they are is because of him, in my opinion. Definitely my favorite member of AC/DC. It's between him and Malcolm Young. I love both of those guys a lot. I think they both added the essential ingredients. Nothing against Angus Young, his stage antics, the head bobbing, I don't know how he doesn't get a migraine, and the unique guitar solo and the energy level beyond description are all necessities. So these kind of combination of all these things, and then the two solid guys in the background keeping the rhythm strong, all those things you need to have success with if you're going to do this night after night. And they had a string of 6 albums together. You know, High Voltage, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, Let There Be Rock, Power Age, Highway to Hell, and then of course the original High Voltage and the original TNT albums. So, and I guess it's kind of 7 albums, but 2 of them are put together, so it's more like 6, I guess. Anyway, some really, really solid, and a lot of the classic AC/DC stuff is on here, like the stuff that people play when they're on tour, bands doing covers and stuff. And you know, even these stupid idol shows, they always are taking Highway to Hell as one of the songs that they're going to sing. You know, somebody's going to do it, you know. This album has some great tracks. I really like this album a lot. It's got like the Jack. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll, which to me is almost anthemic of AC/DC. It's got to be like an anthem for them almost. The 2 songs I like the best, Live Wire and High Voltage, great songs on this album. Dirty Deeds, of course, it has one of the most iconic AC/DC songs in Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, and you know that phone number's probably been worn out everywhere you go. But not one, you know, really not one of my favorite albums by them. There's a lot of kind of iffy songs on this album. I know I'm going to take a little bit of heat for this, but that's just my opinion. It doesn't mean it's true. This does have Problem Child on it, which is very good. And this, of course, was produced from Young and Vonda as well. Big Balls is just kind of a dumb song. I just never really understood why they did that one, but it fits into their kind of musical mode that they like to be in. This is a great shot of them. I think this really kind of explains the group here. Angus being himself and everything. Yeah, this is a fantastic album. It's got some good stuff on it. Again, this is one of the albums that I never really got to listen to too much, so I'm not as familiar with it. The Let There Be Rock album with its whole lot of Rosie, really, really great some great tracks on that. And then, of course, this one with its Girls Got Rhythm, Walk All Over You, Touch Too Much, Beating Around the Bush, and Highway to Hell. That's your side one. Doesn't get much better than that. And the little horns on Angus Young here. You notice that they never really have Bon Scott front and center. It's always Angus, but not on stage, man. Bon Scott was a front guy, no doubt about it. So I've come to respect this band and the musical legacy that they left with us, and they deserve to be honored for their 50 years of playing together. And at this point in time, 2023, this band may be the biggest touring band out there. Yeah, there's some bands maybe that are bigger, but they're not making music anymore. They're not touring anymore, a lot of these bands. This band is still going out there, and they've now announced that it's going to be pretty much the band that people have become used to. They've gotten, other than Malcolm, who has passed away, they're going to be touring with the band that they have. And that you know, to maintain such a high level for so long, I think they're the biggest band in the world right now as far as touring bands go. You know, there might be some bands that people think are more notable than them, but they're not doing anything anymore. So they're still doing it, they're still making it, and they're still making it happen. So I'm going to end this video by saying I honor AC/DC 50th anniversary for a ton of great music and great memories. And if you got any kind of great memories about them that, or little stories about them that I didn't put down, please let me know. I did miss one thing that I did want to say. This album, which we'll be starting with on our next part, was a tribute to the fallen comrade and Bon Scott. I did not mention that, but that was the case. That's what they said they did, and I believe that that's the truth. So I hope you enjoyed this kind of discussion about the legendary rock band AC/DC, and that you will add your own stuff here for our enjoyment as well. So please like and subscribe, and we'll be back with part 2 probably in a couple weeks. This is my first kind of doing something like this, so I may change up and do something a little bit different for part 2. I'm not really sure. I guess I'll wait till I see how everything goes, what kind of feedback I get. You know, that's it. So anyways, I hope you have a good day and a good evening, and we will see you again soon on Prog Monster and on Rock Legends. Take care.